King Charles shocked the entire United Kingdom at midnight when he announced that Princess Diana had secretly left her entire private estate, not to her two beloved sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, but to one person whose name had been hidden for nearly 3 decades. Standing inside Buckingham Palace with Diana's sealed instructions trembling in his hands, the king looked less like Britain's powerful monarch and more like a man confronting a painful promise from the woman he had once married. Diana had lived as the world's most adored princess, but behind her compassion was a private inheritance containing jewelry, journals, recordings, investments, and one final condition that could shake the royal family. Charles wanted the truth revealed, but someone inside the palace had fought desperately to keep it buried. Who was the one person Diana trusted with her entire private estate? Why did King Charles wait until midnight to announce it? And what warning did Diana leave that made the king's voice break before the entire UK? At 11:47 that night, every senior editor in Britain received the same 7-word message from Buckingham Palace: "Remain available. The king will address the nation." There was no explanation, no scheduled ceremony, no national emergency. Yet lights suddenly appeared behind the palace windows. Government vehicles entered through a guarded side gate, and broadcasters abandoned their programs. Within minutes, one question gripped the country. What could King Charles possibly reveal at midnight? Inside the palace, Charles stood alone before a dark wooden desk. A sealed file rested beneath his trembling hand. Written across its cover were the words, "Private Estate of Diana, Princess of Wales. Final Instruction." For 29 years, the file had remained hidden inside a restricted section of the Althorp archives. It had surfaced only 8 days earlier, when archivist Eleanor Whitmore discovered that one catalog number had been deliberately removed from the estate's original register. The missing entry led her to a locked steel drawer containing Diana's handwritten declaration, a solicitor's certificate, and a recording she had made 6 weeks before her death. Charles had listened to that recording once. He had not slept properly since. "Your Majesty," said Sir Jonathan Reeves, the palace's legal advisor, "the injunction expires at midnight. If you do not speak first, the documents will be leaked without context." Charles looked towards the window. Beyond the glass, camera crews were gathering outside the gates. "And William?" he asked quietly. "He knows there was a private trust," Jonathan replied. "He does not yet know who inherited it." Charles closed his eyes. That was the wound inside the revelation. Diana's publicly administered estate had provided for her sons, just as the world understood. But this was different. A separate collection of private property placed into a confidential trust. It included unpublished journals, personal jewelry, recorded memories, a secluded Welsh cottage, and investments intended to fund the humanitarian work she feared would die with her. Diana had left that entire private estate to one person. Not William. Not Harry. Not her brother, Charles Spencer. At 11:58, Queen Camilla entered the room. Her face was colorless. "Have you told them?" she asked. Charles slowly shook his head. Camilla stared at the sealed file, but would not touch it. "When the country hears my name, they will believe I took something from her again." "No," Charles answered, his voice breaking. "This time, they must hear that Diana chose you." The clock moved closer to midnight. Charles walked towards the cameras as millions watched in uneasy silence. He unfolded the statement, paused, and revealed that Diana had named Camilla as the sole beneficiary of her hidden private estate. A wave of disbelief swept across Britain. But Charles had not finished. "There was one condition," he continued, "and tonight I must also acknowledge that someone within royal service prevented that condition from being fulfilled." Behind him, Camilla opened Diana's file. A small recorder began playing automatically. Then Diana's voice filled the room. "If Camilla is hearing this, Charles, the person I warned you about, has already betrayed us." Diana's recorded voice transported everyone in the room back to July 1997, when she was no longer Her Royal Highness, but remained one of the most famous and influential women in the world. She lived at Kensington Palace, traveled with private security, wore jewels worth fortunes, and could command worldwide attention simply by walking into a hospital. But wealth and status had not protected her from loneliness. 6 weeks before her death, Diana had invited Margaret Hale, an experienced trust solicitor, into her private sitting room. Margaret arrived after dusk carrying an empty leather case. Diana was waiting beside the window, holding photographs of William and Harry. "If anything happens to me," Diana said, "my sons will inherit money. That is not what frightens me." "What does?" Margaret asked. "That they will inherit the silence." Years of royal pressure had taught Diana that valuable objects could survive while memories were carefully softened, restricted, or erased. Her public estate would belong to her sons, but she had quietly gathered another collection: private journals, unreleased recordings, personal jewelry, humanitarian investments, and a secluded Welsh cottage purchased through a lawful holding company. Its present value was estimated at more than £18 million, but Diana believed its moral value was greater. She wanted one person to control it. Margaret had nearly dropped her pen when Diana named Camilla Parker Bowles. "People will never understand," the solicitor warned. "They are not supposed to understand yet," Diana replied. "They only need to understand when the time comes." Diana did not choose Camilla out of friendship. Their history carried too much pain for such an easy explanation. She chose her because Camilla was the one woman who might someday stand beside Charles, enter the center of royal power, and influence the atmosphere surrounding William and Harry. Diana could not force the future king to protect her memory, but she could place a moral responsibility in the hands of the woman most likely to share his private life. The trust contained a strict condition. Camilla could inherit only if she married Charles, or officially became his life partner. She would then have to preserve Diana's private records, protect the princes from emotional isolation, and continue 3 humanitarian projects Diana had personally selected. If Camilla refused, concealed the trust, or destroyed any document, the entire estate would pass to those charities. Back in Buckingham Palace, the recording clicked off. Camilla gripped the desk. "I knew nothing about this." Before Charles could answer, his private telephone rang. Prince William's name appeared on the screen. Charles hesitated, then answered. "Tell me it is false," William said. His voice was controlled, but grief trembled beneath every word. "Tell me my mother did not leave her private life to Camilla." "She left Camilla a duty," Charles replied. "The possessions were the weight she attached to it." "And who decided we should learn this with the rest of Britain?" Charles looked towards Sir Jonathan. "That," he said, "is what I am trying to discover." Eleanor Whitmore entered carrying the original archive register. Unlike the royals surrounding her, she possessed no inherited fortune or title, only 22 years of protecting other people's history. She opened the register to an entry dated April 2005, days before Charles married Camilla. Someone had written, "Beneficiary informed, trust declined." Camilla stared at the forged note. "That is not my signature," she whispered. Eleanor turned the page and revealed the authorization beneath it. Charles's face changed instantly. He recognized the handwriting. The handwriting belonged to Lord Alistair Fenwick, the former keeper of royal correspondence and one of the wealthiest private landowners in southern England. For 35 years, Fenwick had served the crown from offices ordinary citizens never saw. He owned a 12-bedroom Hampshire estate, inherited paintings worth millions, and enjoyed direct access to 3 generations of royals. Yet his real wealth was influence. He decided which letters reached royal desks, and which disappeared into locked archives. Charles remembered him as the man who could silence a crisis before breakfast. In 2005, Fenwick had supervised sensitive correspondence surrounding Charles and Camilla's wedding. Margaret Hale, the solicitor who created Diana's trust, had died 2 years earlier. When her firm attempted to notify Camilla, Fenwick intercepted the documents and returned a refusal bearing Camilla's forged signature and an authentic royal office seal. The inexperienced solicitor handling Hale's files accepted it as genuine. The inheritance was not transferred elsewhere. It remained frozen because Diana's instructions required direct acceptance from Camilla. Fenwick had not stolen the estate. He had buried it in legal silence. "Bring him here," Charles ordered. "He is already outside," Sir Jonathan replied. "He came when he heard about the broadcast." Fenwick entered wearing a perfectly tailored black coat. At 79, he still carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to watching powerful people obey. But when Camilla placed the forged document before him, his composure cracked. "You used my name," she said. "I protected the crown," Fenwick answered. "You denied a dead woman's final instruction. I prevented Diana from controlling your marriage from beyond the grave." Camilla stepped closer. "No, you prevented me from choosing." In an adjoining residence, Prince William watched the confrontation through a secured video connection. As heir to the throne, he possessed status, historic residences, and access to enormous royal resources. But in that moment, he was simply Diana's wounded son. Beside his image appeared Prince Harry, calling from California, where he had built an independent life after leaving senior royal duties. "Why were we not told?" Harry demanded. Fenwick looked towards the screen. "Because the trust would have reopened every wound your parents spent years trying to contain." William's jaw tightened. "They were not your wounds to bury." A memory moved through Charles. Fenwick standing outside his office shortly before the 2005 wedding, assuring him that every remaining matter connected to Diana had been properly settled. Charles had heard reassurance. Now he understood it, as confession disguised as service. Eleanor examined the register more closely. 3 pages had been cut from its binding. "What was written here?" she asked. Fenwick remained silent. Sir Jonathan placed Diana's solicitor-certified inventory beside the damaged register. Every item was accounted for, except one, a blue leather journal described as Diana's final private record. "Where is it?" Charles asked. Fenwick's eyes moved towards Camilla. "I never opened it," he said. "Diana designed the lock so only the beneficiary could." Camilla shook her head. "I have no key." Eleanor studied the inventory and found a handwritten note beneath the journal entry. "The key will remain with the one person who never stopped carrying my pain." Everyone looked at Charles. For years, he had kept one object from his marriage hidden inside a drawer at Highgrove. Diana's small sapphire brooch, returned to him after her death. Charles suddenly understood why it had always felt unusually heavy. The key was inside it. The first broadcast had ended after Charles confirmed the inheritance and promised a fuller statement. While Britain waited, he retrieved Diana's sapphire brooch from a secure palace cabinet. A jeweler had once valued it at nearly £500,000, but Charles had kept it for a reason money could not explain. It reminded him of a younger Diana, smiling before their marriage became a public tragedy. He pressed the sapphire gently. Its gold backing opened, revealing a tiny silver key. No one spoke, as Camilla inserted it into the blue journal's lock. The first pages contained Diana's private reflections on motherhood, loneliness, royal duty, and the humanitarian causes that had given her suffering a purpose. She wrote about William's seriousness, Harry's hidden sensitivity, and her fear that both boys would become prisoners of expectations no child had chosen. Then Camilla reached the final entry. Diana explained that leaving the private estate to Camilla was neither surrender nor friendship. It was an act of accountability. If Camilla eventually shared Charles's life, she would also inherit influence over the emotional world surrounding Diana's sons. The jewelry, investments, cottage, recordings, and journals were not rewards. They were a responsibility made too valuable to ignore. Camilla's voice broke as she read Diana's final words aloud. "If you stand beside their father, do not ask my sons to choose between loving him and remembering me. Let my possessions serve the forgotten. Let my words remain honest. And where I could not give them peace, please do not give them silence." William lowered his head. Harry covered his mouth. Across years of disagreement, distance, wealth, duty, and public anger, the brothers were united by the voice of the mother they had lost too young. Camilla closed the journal. "I cannot undo what happened between us," she said, "but I can refuse to benefit personally from what she entrusted to me." She announced that she would legally accept Diana's private estate, satisfying the trust's condition, then place its financial income and Welsh cottage into a humanitarian foundation, supporting landmine survivors, homeless families, and patients living with stigmatized illnesses. Diana's private writings would be preserved under independent archival supervision. William and Harry would receive unrestricted personal access, while publication would require their joint consent. At 12:43, Charles returned before the cameras. This time, Camilla stood beside him, not as a triumphant queen surrounded by royal privilege, but as the shaken recipient of a dead woman's unfinished responsibility. Charles confirmed that Lord Alistair Fenwick had falsified the 2005 refusal. The evidence would be transferred to the appropriate authorities, and an independent inquiry would determine who else had helped suppress the trust. Fenwick's belief that he had protected the monarchy collapsed before millions. By hiding Diana's wishes, he had nearly created the very scandal he feared. Charles then looked directly into the camera. "Diana left her private estate to one person," he said, "but she intended its purpose to belong to millions." Outside Buckingham Palace, the restless crowd became silent. Some people cried. Others lifted photographs of Diana above their heads. They had expected a story about money, rivalry, and revenge. Instead, they witnessed something more painful: a woman who had transformed her deepest wound into a final demand for compassion. Camilla accepted the inheritance, but she did not claim its luxury. William and Harry recovered their mother's unedited voice. Charles finally exposed the silence maintained in his name. And as the palace clock moved towards 1, Diana's final recording played once more inside the room. "Love is not proved by what we keep. It is proved by what we refuse to let the world forget."